You are listening to the Bat Flip Podcast, a baseball podcast from Belly Up Sports and the Belly Up Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Damian and Matt.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Bat Flip Podcast. This is episode 13. My name is Damian. I'm here with my co-host, Matt. We got a packed show for you today. We got some managers being hired, some options being declined, and the official start of free agency.
Yeah, it's gonna already been a pretty crazy week with all the different decisions being made on player options and everything this week, and our like you said, free agency officially starting today actually, and obviously it's gonna be a long off season, so we're gonna go ahead and in this episode make our fifth predictions on 15 of the top free agents, and we'll get into it here.
Yeah, this off season is gonna be like an off season we've never seen before. It's going to be a very, very slow-paced off-season. This is not like the NFL and the NBA where they have, as soon as free agency opens, half the league is already signed pretty much. Baseball is very slow and methodical with it, and especially with the way that COVID has impacted the owners and just MLB in general this season. Um, you'll see by some of the options and stuff we talk about that they're penny pinching. A lot of owners are penny pinching now, and so we have no idea what this market is going to look like this year, and where free agents are going to go, and how much money people are going to get.
Yeah, and it's going to be weird because I think part of this stuff that a lot of these options be declined and everything has been preparation for the potential to have reduced payrolls this coming up year from a lot of teams. But it also might be a little bit of it might be more, like I say, preparation than it is that they're for sure not going to spend any money and they're going to reduce their payrolls because nobody knows what it's going to look like at the beginning of next year. Nobody knows where the economy is going to be at. Nobody knows where the COVID situation is going to be at, and if they're going to be able to have full crowds or half crowds or no crowds or what. If they're going to start on time, which I would assume they probably will start on time at this point, having just finished a fairly successful season that was obviously shortened, but um, I think we're going to see free agency be pretty slow. You might actually end up seeing some trades be a bigger way for teams to acquire talent, as in maybe being able to move for a very cost controlled player by giving up a prospect premium. You might see some of that this year while the teams are uncertain, especially if a team wants to go for it next year and try to win. But we'll see. It's going to be an interesting offseason for sure.
Yeah. So we're just going to head and get started on this. We had three managerial openings this year, which was the Chicago White Sox, the Detroit Tigers, and the Boston Red Sox. And Chicago has hired their manager, and they went back to one of their old managers from
Really old
1979
manager.
1979 to 1986. Tony La Russa managed the Chicago White Sox. You found a little interesting nugget about Tony La Russa with the White Sox.
Yeah, so obviously this is shocking to start with that Tony La Russa has decided to come back to manage the baseball team. I believe he's 76 years old,
Yep.
and very surprising. But he had a very successful career. Has a 1,408 wins in his career, which is third all time. He's already an MLB Hall of Famer. He's a three-time World Series champ, and and like you said, he's managed the White Sox. He also managed Oakland and St. Louis, where he won his World Series titles. But that little nugget you were talking about, the White Sox actually fired him in the middle of the 1986 season, and 3 weeks later he was picked up by Oakland to be their new manager, and that's where his career really took off. So I thought that was very interesting that Chicago that I never knew that Chicago fired him mid-season, and I bet they regretted that for a while, and I think part of that regret might be why the owner just decided to bring him back now. So this is a very interesting move. It's going to be really interesting to see how this one works out.
Yeah, and a little interesting thing I found is that Tony La Russa once managed Minnie Minoso with the Chicago White Sox. Minnie Minoso was born November 29th in 1925. He will now be managing a kid by the name of Dylan Cease, who was born December 28th of 1995. And he's going to be managing them both for the White Sox. So, what in this sense, Minnie Minoso was over 70 years old when Dylan Cease was actually born. And now Tony La
Jeez,
Russa is going to be managing Dylan Cease in the major leagues.
that's just. I mean, that's nutty. I mean, that really is. And I mean, you think about. I I just have no idea how this is going to work out because you bring up a
Yeah.
stat like that, and the game has changed so much since that time. And of course, he's been around as recently as 2011 as a manager, and he stayed in the game. But how is this going to work out? The game's changed a lot just since 2011, in the what's about to be 10 years since then, and um, is this something where as Tony La Russa, has he adapted? How well is he going to fit with a young team? I mean, they've got a lot of like Luis Robert and Eloy Jimenez and Young Moncada. They got a lot of young guys in that clubhouse. Dylan Cease, like you mentioned, um,
Mhm.
and it's going to be interesting to see how he meshes with these guys. And I think it could work out. I mean, obviously Tony La Russa has done it before and he knows what it's all about, but it's going to be interesting for sure. It's a very weird hire, and I think it's quite obvious this isn't a super long term type thing. I mean, it's not like Tony La Russa is going to be managing this team for the next 15 years. So it's definitely this is definitely interesting for sure.
Yeah, and how's he going to adapt with a team that is very on the forefront of bat flipping and showing their emotions and being real brash out there? Whereas in Tony La Russa is obviously an old school manager who does things by a book. He does things. He was the Cardinals manager for a long time. I mean, that's where the Cardinals way kind of came from. I mean, he has a certain way of just going about your business, just put your head down and do what you do,
Yeah.
and everything else will work out. And now he's got to kind of adjust to you know, the best of both worlds, where can he make that a possibility, but also not take away these kids' enjoyment of the game?
Yeah, and not to mention the fact that with a lot of the new analytics that have, you know, that I think that's something where you're going to see Tony La Russa. How does he read into these analytics, and is he gonna put is he gonna put his highest batting average hitting first, or is he gonna try to put his hitters in an order that's more analytically friendly? I think it's going to be interesting to see because I think if you look at like Luis Robert, where's he going to end up hitting? Is he going to hit him lead off? Is he going to hit him second? Is he going to hit Tim Anderson lead off? It's
Right.
really hard to say exactly how this is going to work because there's going to be a time where, back when Tony La Russa was was a big time manager, that your best hitter might get the fifth most at bats on the team because he's hitting fourth or fifth. So
Hmm.
and then but nowadays obviously it's been kind of shown to be better to hit your best hitter second in the order or first. So it's going to be interesting to see how he manages. And I mean, who knows, maybe in his interviews and stuff, maybe he's changed his opinion on some things and he is accepted the way the game is now and wants to show he can do it. So it'll be very interesting. As we did it when you did our research on him, he is actually only like, I think you might know a closer number, but I think he's like 30 wins away from second on the all-time wins list. Said he was third, and he
It was more
currently
like
is third. But
I want to say it was like 50 or 60, but it is close. He should pass him next year.
yeah, so he's going to become second on the all-time wins list this coming up season.
Yeah.
Very interesting, to say the least. And then, uh, as controversial as the Tony La Russa hire was, we've got another hire that was pretty dang controversial by the Detroit Tigers.
Yeah, it's weird because as much as La Russa wasn't not many people thought he was a candidate for the job, and actually a lot of people within the Chicago White Sox front office and kind of daily workings wanted to hire AJ Hinch, who was the old Astros manager, and the Jerry Reinsdorf, the owner of the White Sox, said no, we're hiring La Russa, and therefore they get to deal with AJ Hinch in their division for the next 10 to 15 years or however long it is because AJ Hinch has been hired by the Detroit Tigers, taking over for Ron Gardenhire, who had to retire due to health issues.
Yes, AJ Hinch obviously is remembered from his time in Houston from 2015 to 2019. He also he did manage in Arizona for a couple of years back in 2009 and 2010. Of course, he's got a very good record as a big league manager, 570 and 452 record. which is, I believe it was top 30 on the all-time win percentage list. He was the controversial part, obviously, is that 2017 World Series championship that he won with the Astros, and then the fallout of the sign stealing scandal that netted him a 1-year suspension in 2020, which he'll be coming back from. This will be his first games managed since then. Interesting. His involvement in that scandal was definitely kind of weird. I think that he wanted to he wanted to not upset some of the veteran players on that team that were kind of part of that. So it was hard for him to shut it down, he said, and stuff. Obviously, he should have shut it down, but he was against it kind of the whole time, type deal. So he didn't want his clubhouse to turn against him. So he kind of turned his head to it. So it's not like AJ Hinch was super into it, but he also let it happen under his watch. So it's hard to say. I'm sure everyone has their opinion on that, but as just a manager, I think it's a good hire.
Yeah, he is a very good manager. He went to Houston just as they were kind of hitting that turnaround period where those young guys, that homegrown talent that they had, kind of needed that last extra push to get up to playoffs and World Series contention. And AJ Hinch is a fantastic, fantastic manager. Um, Outside of all of the uh, the sign stealing stuff, before that, he was considered probably the top, if not top two or three manager in the entire game. So this is a fantastic hire for that young rebuilding Detroit team, and somebody who's going to bring that playoff and that World Series experience from the managerial seat, being able to help kind of, he got there right at Houston right at the time as they were getting the push up. Detroit's a little farther away from that, but Hinch is going to be fantastic for that team and getting them in the right footing to start being a competitive baseball team again.
Yes, I mean, like I say, there's not much you can. I mean, depending on what you think about that, the cheating scandal and the 1-year suspension and his involvement specifically in that. Uh, I mean, I think Hinch is a great hire for them if you're not too worried about that. So, but let's move on. We've got
Well,
a what's up?
I just wanted to hit on the last team that has a managerial opening.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That is the Boston Red Sox. They have it looks like they're down to about 4 or 5 finalists for that seat. So hopefully by the time we talk to you guys next week, that seat will be filled, and we can bring that to you.
Yeah, I know Alex Cora is a candidate for that, which he was their manager when they won the World Series in 2018. And his involvement in that sign stealing scandal was he was the bench coach, I believe, for the
Yep. Yep.
Astros was a lot heavier than Hinch's. That's why he drew the 1-year suspension. So this is going to be very interesting to see if they bring him back.
Yeah. So, well, let's go ahead and jump over to some of the most notable options that we found that got declined this week. Um, Colton Wong, which is Cardinals second baseman, had his I think it was $12.5 million option declined. Brad Hand, who led the major leagues in saves this year, got his option declined. Brett Gardner, who's been a Yankee for his entire career, got his option declined. Charlie Morton got his option from the Tampa Bay Rays declined. Mitch Moreland got his $3 million option declined from the Padres. And Carlos Santana got his option denied, and I believe he said it was 17 and a half.
It was 17 and a half. So
That's 17.5 million from the Indians.
so some of these are really surprising. I'm surprised that Colton Wong getting declined because he had kind of turned the corner a little bit the last couple years. Had improved a little bit offensively, and his defense at second base is some of the best in the league. Brad Hand, I mean, he led the majors in saves last year, as you said. I'm surprised that they declined his option. To be serious, I think that Brad
Yeah, let
Hand's
me.
one of the best relievers in baseball. They invested a lot of prospect capital to get him back in, I believe it was 2018 when they traded for him. I really don't understand declining that option because it was, I mean, I feel like it was probably about his what his value should have been, or maybe even a little less. I thought it was fairly team friendly, but honestly, you saw that none of the teams claimed him because he was put on waivers, I believe, after he was declined. Nobody claimed him, so that was pretty surprising.
Yeah,
Um,
for 10, I mean, it was only $10 million. And he's a very, I mean, very serviceable major league reliever, back end closer. I mean, led the league in
yeah,
saves this year, and nobody's willing to grab him for $10 million. So if that's the case, I mean, that's a sign that this market is going to head down a very, very slippery slope this year.
yeah, for sure. And Charlie Morton got declined. His option was $15 million, and that was kind of interesting. I'm pretty surprised that they declined that one. I don't know about you, but he had a he didn't have a great season this year, but he still was, he did well in the playoffs, and he was he's a good player. He's a really good pitcher. He'll probably get signed for around 15 million, if not more. But I do understand with the Rays having that low payroll, a $15 million option if you're not totally sure about a player is probably not the best thing to look at.
Yeah, and I'm surprised that they declined his option too. Charlie Morton has said many times over that he is very much considering retirement, and he said before the World Series that if the Rays declined his option, that he would pretty much just retire. So it's going to be very fascinating to see if the Rays were like, "Hey, we don't want to pay you 15 million, but we still want you back." His family is from the Tampa Bay, Florida area, so he doesn't want to go to any other team. So it could be a thing where they were like, "Hey, can we sign you to an $8 to $9 million, kind of save, 5 6 million dollars this year and kind of just help the salary." So it's going to be fascinating to see what happens with Charlie Morton. I expect that if he does play, he will be back in Tampa though.
Yeah, that would be that would make sense. And I mean, there's other teams around there. Like, he was originally a Brave. You could maybe see the Braves will probably pick up a guy on a 1 year deal, a pitcher, starting pitcher on a 1 year deal, like a veteran type guy. That would be a good fit there. I don't know if he would go back to the Braves. And like you said, I mean, he could very much go back to Tampa on a little bit of a lower cost. You saw Carlos Santana. That's not super surprising because he is a first base slash DH type who is, he's up there in his age at this point, and he had a $17.5 million option, which is fairly high, especially for a very low mid market team like the Cleveland Indians. So I could very well see Santana going back to Cleveland for cheaper, kind of like you were talking about with Morton.
Yeah, I can too. This was his second go around in Cleveland, and he just seems to thrive there. Seems to like the stadium that he hits in, the fans, the city. I mean, he just seems to have
Yeah,
a lot going on in the Cleveland area. So I think he's definitely an option to go back at a cheaper deal. But let's go ahead and jump over to the qualifying offers that were out. So for those of you that don't know, qualifying offers pretty much just give the team that controls that player. So for instance, we'll say JT Realmuto, he was traded to the Phillies 2 years ago. He's going to be a free agent this year. So what the Phillies can do is they can say, okay, we're going to give you an offer of a 1 year, $18.9 million contract. And if you go out to the free agency market and you decline this offer, they can still negotiate with him and negotiate a contract outside of that qualifying offer. But pretty much what that just does is it says that if you go sign with another team, that team has to forfeit a draft pick, and we get a draft pick after the first round the following season. So let's just say JT Realmuto goes and signs with the Mets. Then the Mets will then have to forfeit their first round pick, while then the Phillies will gain a pick right after the first round.
yes, and it does depend on where that pick is, whether or not you forfeit your first or second rounder. If you are, I believe it's the top 10, it might be the top 15
I think it's
picks.
top 10.
I think it's top 10. Okay. So top 10 picks in the first round, then you don't forfeit your first rounder, but you do forfeit your second rounder, if that makes sense. And then the team that receives a pick back gets them in the competitive balance round. So like the right after the first round, they would get like the 31st or 32nd pick or something would be
Mm-hmm.
theirs. So the players with qualifying offers, and we'll we'll talk about the teams that they're getting them from as well. Real Muto is getting one from the Phillies. DJ LeMahieu from the Yankees, Trevor Bauer from the Reds. No surprises there. George Springer from the Astros. Marcus Stroman from the Mets is not a shock, but I could maybe see him taking that qualifying offer for $18.9 million this offseason with it being such a weird offseason and not a lot of uncertainty about how much money teams are going to be willing to spend. And the shocking one, and I was surprised by this, and I don't I don't know about you, but Kevin Gossman got a qualifying offer, and I like Kevin Gossman. He had a pretty good year this year, but my gosh, that's I would have been surprised if he had gotten a 2-year, $20 million deal. So
Yeah.
um, Kevin Gossman's going to get the 1 million. I would be shocked if he didn't take that.
Yeah, I've heard that he's was negotiating with the Giants on a multi-year deal anyways, but I was surprised that if he would have got $10 million, like you said, out in the open market, and for him to get the 18.9 just shows how much that the Giants want to bring him back because if he does not take that deal, he's going to be losing out on quite a bit of money this offseason. And if he does take it, then pretty much he can continue negotiating with the Giants. And if nothing works out, then the Giants can trade him, and then he goes out to the free agent market next year with no draft pick compensation attached to him at all.
Yeah,
Um,
it's very
so
unfortunate for Kevin Gossman on his side because um, if he was looking for a change of scenery and having a multi-year deal, which would have been a little bit more total money, he's just not going to get that now because nobody. I doubt people would have signed him to a big deal to start with. And now having a draft pick attached to him, there's even more risk involved in that. So, or penalty to signing him. So I'd be surprised. But I mean, I've seen crazier things. He might decline it. Who knows? But I would be very surprised if he declined that.
yeah, so we're pretty much all sure that JT Realmuto, DJ LeMahieu, Trevor Bauer, and George Springer are going to decline these. They're in the seat for a lot of money this offseason.
Yeah.
Mark Stroman is a fascinating case. He is a very proven major league starter. I consider him a high end number two. Some consider him a low end two, high end three. But he can he can take this offer and come back to the Mets after an injury riddled year that I don't even think he pitched in the majors this year. If he did,
No.
it was one
He
game.
had the injury and then he opted out. So
Yeah. So he didn't even pitch in the majors this year. So going out to the market and signing a guy to big money who you haven't seen in a year, it was actually coming off an injury anyways. I mean, not many teams want to do that, especially and then what we don't know what this offseason is going to be. It's a bigger risk for Stroman, but he's also a guy that usually bets on himself. So I can very much see him accepting this 1 year, offer, which is more money than he would probably get overall, anyways. If he's out on the market, he'd probably get, a 15 to $16 million a year, and this is a chance at close to 19. Uh, so he could take that and then, you know, have a strong year with the Mets and go back out next year. Same thing with Gossman with no draft pick attached to him, and probably even be the top free agent starter next year.
yeah, and if you're Stroman or Gossman too, you accept this offer, and next year you come back, and if things are more back to normal revenue wise for teams, they'll be more willing to pay. And you take a 1-year deal this year. I'd be surprised if Gossman, especially if he got more than. He might get more total money, but at his age and kind of the trajectory that he's on, having a little bit of a bounce back year this past year, if he proves that was a real thing this coming up year, he could be in for a pretty good payday compared to. I mean, he could be hitting 20, 15 to 20 million of annual value, whereas I mean, I doubt he would have gotten more than $10 million annually with the way that his career has gone so far. And Stroman probably would have gotten $15 million annually, maybe. But I would think he'd be a little bit more on the low side of that. For Stroman, I think it's going to be more of I feel like I can do more next offseason. So it's going to be interesting to see what those two do. And we'll talk a little bit more about Stroman here in a minute. But we'd like to go on into our free agency preview of. I think we're going to give our top 15 free agents or top 15 of the top free agents. There's a lot of debate on who could be like the 10th to 5th to 20th best free agent out there, but we're going to give our predictions on the team they go to and how much money they make. And I believe we're going to start here with one of your guys from the Los Angeles Dodgers, Jock Peterson.
Yeah, big jock. I don't. He's a fascinating case because the Dodgers looked at trading him last year. Actually had a deal figured out with the Los Angeles Angels to send him and Ross Stripling over there, but that deal got kind of nixed because the owner Artie Moreno didn't want to wait for the Mookie Betts trade to be finalized. So pretty much Jock Peterson came back. Um, so he's an interesting case because he's more of a platoon DH. Um, but when he's in there against righties, he's amazing. I mean, he's hit 30 home runs before, just basically playing righties only. So I have him going and actually signing with the Atlanta Braves. What did I have him going for? I had him going for 3 years at $35 million.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I think he's a perfect fit for the Braves as well, and what they want to do. And a little bit of this depends on the whether or not and a lot of these guys that we're about to talk about depend on a little bit of whether the NL permanently adopts the DH or not. Because I think if they do have the DH, I think that the left field will be a big spot for the Braves next year, and that Peterson would then platoon maybe with Adam Duvall in left field, which would give you a really good 1-2 platoon with Duvall hitting lefties as well as he does, and then bring in Jock Peterson who hits righties extremely well. You could hard platoon there and just it would be incredible. I think Jock Peterson does have the talent to where he could end up being an everyday type player. I mean, he obviously can hit right-handed pitching extremely well. If he just works on his approach a little bit, he might even be able to improve against left-handed pitching to a certain level. And like you say, DH, he could definitely he's probably best suited going forward as a DH, but I do think he's still adequate in left field to the point to where I wouldn't worry about throwing him out there against on days you're playing right-handed pitching, especially if you're the Braves and you have Adam Duvall out there who you can maybe bring in as a defensive replacement. So I have him signing with the Braves on a 2-year, 220, not 200, a 2-year, $25 million contract.
Yeah, he's a like we said, he's a fantastic major league player. It's going to be weird to see where he can actually go because of if the NL adopts the DH or not. So our next guy we had was James Paxton, New York Yankees left-handed pitcher, coming off an injury-riddled year. Didn't look the best even when he was out there. Um, so I just have him pretty much re-signing with the Yankees for 1 year at $9 million. Just kind of another prove yourself deal. And the Yankees need the pitching, and why not bring back a guy that they've had for a couple years and just see if he can rekindle it, and then Paxton can go back out to the market next year.
Yeah, that's interesting. Paxton, I believe when he's fully healthy and he's an ace level pitcher. I mean, he's shown it before. He was an ace for a while in Seattle with the Mariners. He's I think that he gets I think that he does take a 1-year deal. Like you said, trying to kind of on a prove it deal. Because this is a guy that if he comes back and shows he can stay healthy for a full season, which health has been a problem in the past, not just this past year as well. Um, you could see him coming out and if he's healthy, pitching an ace level season. I mean, he's got all the stuff. He's a hard thrower from the left side from as a lefty. I have him actually going to the Blue Jays. He's a Canadian, and think that would be I was trying to think of teams that needed pitching, and I think the Blue Jays could definitely use a guy who's a kind of a stopgap type in their rotation that can come in and they're coming off a playoff season and they have a young team, a lot of young offensive players. You bring in Paxton and improve that rotation a little bit for this year. If he has a bad year and he's not healthy, then so be it. But if he could also have just an extremely good ace level season like he has before, and then you've got yourself a very valuable piece, whether you move him at the deadline if you're out of it, or make a playoff run with him. So I think Paxton goes to the Blue Jays. I got 1 year, $15 million. I think he gets a little bit more money just because of taking that 1 year deal and the fact that he's been so good in the past.
Big Maple going back home.
Hmm
He actually threw a no-hitter in Toronto
He
before,
did.
didn't he? Yeah.
I believe it was in Toronto. Yeah, when he was a member of the Seattle Mariners. So
Yep. Well, our next guy we have is Didi Gregorius, former New York Yankees shortstop, signed a one-year deal this past offseason with the Philadelphia Phillies. Had a pretty good year. Um, I could definitely see the Phillies re-signing him, but I think I actually have the Phillies signing another shortstop that we will hit on in just a little bit. But I have Didi Gregorius going to the Los Angeles Angels for 3 years and $64 million. They're needing another left-handed bat in that lineup. That's pretty solid. And Simmons is now gone, and they have shown the willingness to not pay up for pitching and just go to the offensive side of the ball. So Didi is, I think he's a pretty good fit in Anaheim.
yeah, it'll be interesting. I could see that. I have him just going back to the Phillies. I don't think he gets quite as much money. I have him at 3 years, $40 million. I think the Phillies obviously will need a shortstop again, and I don't think there's an obvious guy that they could move over there or a guy coming up for them. So I could see him going back there, and I think they gave him a multi-year deal. He was a really good player for the Yankees, and he had a pretty good year in Philly. He's a nice defensive player, has a little bit of pop, can hit. I mean, I think he's a solid player, and I think 3 year, $40 million deal would make sense for him. Maybe in a different offseason he gets a little bit more, but I say it's about what he gets this time. So.
Well, I'll let you go next. Go first on the next guy, and that is Masahiro Tanaka.
Yeah, Tanaka's an interesting situation. He's a guy who's battled injury at times, maybe battled a little bit of consistency. Um, but I actually have him going to the Braves on a 1 year deal. I have him at $15 million, kind of like I had Paxton. He's a guy who he's a little bit similar to Paxton with his history. He's had an ace level season. He's got really good stuff. He has battled injuries a few times, and obviously he was a teammate of Paxton this past year in New York. So the Braves are probably going to sign a pitcher to a 1 year deal, veteran pitcher, as they did this past year with Cole Hamels, the year before with with Dallas Keuchel. I definitely think that you see him, or you see the Braves, whether it's Tanaka, who I kind of predicting, or it could also be Charlie Morton if he decides to not retire. Now that he's a free agent. There's a few different choices they could go to, but I have Tanaka go into the Braves. I think it makes sense.
Yeah, I have Tanaka just staying in New York. I think he's found a home with the Yankees. I don't think he wants to go anywhere else. I believe he might have had a deal almost lined up to come play for the Angels, if I'm not mistaken. I could be very wrong on that when he came over. But I just think that New York is his home and where he's found. So I have him staying in New York at a 3 for 35.
Yeah, and that makes sense too. So
Well, our next one on our list is Michael Brantley. Um, I have Michael Brantley just going back to his old roots, going back to Cleveland. They're in need of outfield help, and Michael Brantley he struggled with injury when he was there before, but he's shown the ability to when he is healthy just to rake at the plate. Doesn't hit for much power, but you can just hit the ball all over the field. He did it with Houston. I don't think he goes back to Houston. I just think Cleveland it makes too much sense, and I have him going for 3 at 50.
yeah, I have Brantley going back to Houston. Actually, I think he's liked his time in Houston. He's kept continued as a good player there, and has really, like you say, he's just a guy that hits the ball at all fields. He's one of the best contact hitters in baseball, and he, I don't. He's not a great defender anymore, but you can still stick him out there in left field. The Indians do make sense. I do worry about the Indians having too many of the left field DH types. With things they got Franmil Reyes and having traded for Josh Naylor, this is another guy that would pretty much be relegated to left field / DH, and that would give them three of those guys. So. Um, I think he fits well in the Houston lineup. He had a good season this year. That the team went to the ALCS, so I see him coming back to Houston. He is 34, I believe, so I don't think he signs a long term deal or anything, but 3 years, $35 million, a little bit cheaper. I know his last deal was a lot more underwhelming than a lot of people expected when he originally signed with the Astros, and I think he just stays there. So
Yeah, not too bad of a call. Next up is Liam Hendricks, closer for the Oakland Athletics. Has pretty much proved the last couple years to be one of the best closers in the game. Um, been able to be very consistent. I think that a team that is in desperate need of bullpen help, especially a back end closer type, is the Philadelphia Phillies. They've had bad stretches where they've signed a guy like David Robertson who has been able to stay healthy. And then they traded for, Brandon Workman and Heath Hembry this year, and both of those guys are now gone. So Philadelphia just makes a lot of sense to me and throwing money at that bullpen. So I have him going for 4 at 60.
yeah, that would make a ton of sense. That makes too much sense, honestly, that the Phillies would go after him. I think he's the best relief pitcher available. I mean, you could maybe argue for Brad Hand, but I do think Hendricks is the best one out there. He's a guy that can pitch multiple innings out of the bullpen as well. I have him actually going to the Dodgers. 3 year, $40 million. I think the Dodgers will soon try to look for a guy that can replace Kenley Jansen in that closer role. You kind of saw it down the stretch this year. Kenley Jansen is not quite as consistent as he once was. He still has times where he looks really, really good, but he's up there in age now a little bit, and he's just not quite as consistent. I think you go out there and you get Hendricks, and you bring in a guy who obviously has that closing experience and has the stuff to be a lockdown guy. I could see him going back to the A's, although I'm a little worried about the A's spending money on relievers. Especially a guy who's gonna command at least $10 million a year. I mean, I have him when signing a very similar deal to what the Braves signed Will Smith to this past offseason. And I think the Dodgers make sense for him. Phillies make so much sense, but I do think that their money situation is going to be. I mean, I've got them signing Gregorius and Real Muto. Spoiler alert. Um, but that's going to be. They've got a lot of money tied up already, so I don't know how much they're going to be willing to throw at a specific guy. I think they're just going to probably piece together some 1 year $5 million type guys to build some depth in that bullpen.
I could see it. I just think they need that shutdown guy as well. Um, so we'll go ahead and jump over to Marcelo Zuna, fan favorite of yours, I know.
Oh yeah.
Um, I actually have Marcelo Zuna not resigning in Atlanta, but I have him going to replace another outfielder that is leaving the city of Houston. I see the Astros signing Marcelo Zuna for 4 years at $100 million.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think part of that might depend on Brantley too, whether the Astros go after somebody because Brantley's a potential DH for them as well. But I could see Ozuna leaving. I think a lot of it depends on how willing the Braves are to spend this offseason with the revenue situation. I have him coming back to Atlanta on a 4 year, $90 million deal. Um, I think that a lot of this has to do with the DH situation because I don't think the Braves will be willing to pay him as much if the NL doesn't have a DH. So I think, but if you look at, I mean, he fit extremely well in that clubhouse. He had a really good season. I wouldn't worry too much about sticking him in left field for a season, even though he's not the best outfielder. But I mean, it seems to me like a lot of teams are of that opinion that he really needs to be in a place where he can DH. So if they don't if they don't bring the DH back in the NL next year, then I could see him going to sign with an AL team because the Braves wouldn't offer him quite as much money. But I do have him coming back to Atlanta next year. So.
Yeah, I could definitely see him going back to Atlanta. He flourished over there this year. I think he kind of found a home as well. I just don't know. I don't know what Alex Anthopoulos is going to do. I don't know if he's going to try and focus on that or if he's going to try and just try and focus more on the pitching staff and throw their money that way because they haven't shown the willingness to kind of spend a lot of money at the same time. They kind of let Josh Donaldson go last year. They kind of waited him out, but weren't willing to go past their certain number for him. And I could see the same thing happening with Marcelo Ozuna. Um, but we'll go along to our next guy, which is Boomstick Nelson Cruz, a guy who's 41 years old and still able to hit 40 home runs with ease. Um, I feel like he's found a home in Minnesota. I don't think he wants to leave there. He's done very, very well. That team is very up and coming, and his veteran leadership is very nice with that club. So I have him re-signing for 2 years at 38 million.
Yeah, that's interesting. Nelson Cruz is still a really good player. I have him going back to the Twins. I could maybe see him going to the Rangers as a farewell tour, where he started his career, and you know if depending on whether the Rangers want to spend or not. But I do have him go back to the Twins. I got 1 year, $15 million. I don't think the Twins are going to be really willing to give him a second year at his age. So you never know when that fall off might come. So I do have Cruz going back there. He had a really good year this year yet again. So he's a great player.
Well, we'll jump to the next one, which is Justin Turner. And I'll let you go ahead and start with Justin Turner.
Yeah, your guy Justin Turner from the Dodgers. I have him actually going to the Cubs. I think the
Mm,
Cubs are a team that's going to want to maybe give it one more go round with their current core. And Justin Turner's a veteran guy who they can throw out there. And if the DH comes back, he might be suited for a DH role. Even though he still is a good infielder, he's also 36 years old and he has been declining in the field a little bit. Still a good guy at the plate, so you might see that a little bit. You can also limit somebody's reps if you have them as a part-time DH. They're probably going to lose. They're I say probably. They're possibly going to lose Chris Bryant in this upcoming offseason because he's going to be a free agent. So you might see, then if he left, then Turner could take over for a 1 year stopgap there. If you do keep him around, so I have him for 2 years, $40 million. I think he's a really good player, and he would make sense there in my opinion. And you can always throw Chris Bryant out in left field, where he's also, he is also good out there for the upcoming season if you're able to get Turner.
that is straight pain from the Dodger fan the side of me right now. Um, well, let's go ahead and jump to Marcus Stroman. We kind of
Who's your pick on Turner?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I have him resigning with the
Okay.
Dodgers. I picked 2 years, 30 million. Um, he's an LA boy. Went to Cal State Fullerton, and I just feel that he's found a home in LA. I mean, he loves being back in Southern California. I don't think he'll want to leave. He's the leader of that team. Um, he's their rep for the Players Association, and everybody on that team says that he's the heart and soul. Um, he might not be the best player on the team. We got Mookie Betts, you have Corey Seager, you have Cody Bellinger, but he's one of the most important parts of that team. Um, and I just don't think there's a way that Andrew Friedman lets him go. So I have him going back to the Dodgers. Um,
Yeah, that makes sense.
So we'll go ahead and jump to Marcus Stroman. We kind of talked on him a little bit earlier. I hit that he should take the qualifying offer, and that's what I think he'll do. So I have him going back to the New York Mets on the qualifying offer.
I do too. I don't think Stroman really likes being on the Mets, but maybe with the change of ownership, he will change his mind on that. But I do have him going back there just because I think that that's the thing that makes the most financial sense for his case is to take that qualifying offer. But I do think that you could very well see him not take that offer and sign somewhere else on a 1 year deal because he doesn't want to be with the Mets. So
Yeah. Well, we'll go jump to Marcus Semien, who's been a Gold Glove shortstop for the Oakland Athletics before. Had a really down year this year. I think he's just going to be looking for a change of scenery. I don't think Oakland is going to be willing to kind of pay the money that they're going to need to bring Marcus Semien back. And I think that the Philadelphia Phillies are going to do what they did with Didi Gregorius last year. They jumped in, signed him to a 1 year deal, um, put him in a hitter's ballpark, let him flourish. And I think that's kind of what they'll do with Marcus Semien. Bring him in, and I have him going there for a 1 year, $10 million.
Yeah, and I get that for sure. I'm in agreement on the 1 year deal for him. This is a guy who had an MVP level season year before, last year, and then this season he struggled a little bit. He had some injury problems for part of the season, and I have him going back to the A's on a 1 year, $18 million deal. I think he's a really good player, and um, I think that he could cash in on a long term deal if he's able to kind of refine his success that he had in 2019. Next year in 2021 with the A's, so I see him probably going back to the A's. But that 1 year deal, he could sign anywhere with that. So
Next up is George Springer, former Houston Astros center fielder. He's pretty vocal, said that he doesn't want to go back to Houston. Um, so I don't. His market's going to be very weird because he's 31, but he's still a fantastic player. I think that the San Francisco Giants are going to sign him. They're a team that's been looking for their big outfielder for a while. They were very much in the race for Bryce Harper a couple years ago, and they just kind of are looking for that one stud guy. So I got them signing him for 5 years at 110 million.
yeah, that makes sense. I actually have him 5 years, 115 million, so basically the same thing. Um, but I have him. I had a really hard time deciding where I thought he was going to go because I don't really think he's going back to Houston. I think that maybe I know there's a lot of rumors, or it's not really rumors, but just speculation that he might end up going to the Mets with their new ownership, and they might try to make a splash and sign him. I actually picked him to go to the Reds. Um, I mean, I feel like it's going to be a team nobody's really talking about, and the Reds could definitely use an outfielder and a big bat. They had a great pitching rotation this year, but they never were able uh, to really figure it out with the bats. So I know that they've got a few guys that they are throwing out in center, but they really haven't stuck with a specific guy in center field. Springer can still kind of play center. He's probably more suited for a corner spot at this point, but I think he ends up going back to the Reds, or going to the Reds. So 5 years, $115 million, like I said. But we'll go on, move up to our. Only got three left here, and we'll move up to DJ LeMahieu. What you think, Damien? DJ LeMahieu.
Yeah, I mean, last time he was a free agent, he kind of got shafted. Really, I mean, he was the best free agent second baseman out there, probably one of the top 4 or 5 free agents as well, and kind of had to wait a long time. Many people thought that the Dodgers would re-sign him, or not re-sign him. The Dodgers would sign him because they had a hole. The Rockies were kind of in contention to re-sign him. Um, he ended up going to the Yankees for like 2 years and $24 million. And all he's done since he's gone over there is hit and play fantastic fielding. He's an MVP candidate the last couple years playing over there, and I don't think that the Yankees are gonna let him go anywhere. He's one of their hearts and souls of that club. So I have him re-signing with the Yankees for 3 years at 50 million.
Yeah, and I also have him going back to the Yankees. I think he loves hitting in Yankee Stadium. I think that has had something to do with a little bit of his success hitting in Yankee Stadium with hitting the home run ball. He's always been a guy who could, spray the ball over the field and hit for, doesn't strike out a lot. But I like him going back to the Yankees. I think the Yankees like him a lot. Their fans like him. I have him actually signing a 4 year, $75 million deal. This is a guy who is as an MVP candidate, like, he is 32, and I think that's the thing that's going to limit him. But I mean, he's an MVP candidate, so I'll be surprised if he signs for anything less than you know 18 to $20 million a year, and I think he could get more. But I think with this offseason, it might limit him a little bit.
I think if he's going anywhere else, he might be pushing for that 18 to $20 million. Um, but just kind of being with the Yankees and having that Stanton contract, that Cole contract, and I mean 16, and I think mine was like 16.6 million a year. Um, I think he'll be willing to take that. Um, but we'll jump up to the best catcher in baseball, and that is JT Realmuto. Uh, we've talked a lot about him with the Sixto Sanchez this year from the Marlins. There's been a thing going around in Philadelphia that they should re-sign JT Realmuto from the minute that they got him. They should sign him to an extension. And it's been really weird that Philadelphia ownership. They've said that they've had talks, but talks have never really went anywhere. The fans have been all over him to re-sign JT Realmuto, and if they let him walk out that door and go sign somewhere else, let it be the Mets or somewhere else, especially the Mets because they're in division, the fans will rip the Middletons apart. So I have him going back to Philadelphia on a 4-year, $75 million deal.
Yeah, and this one's going to be interesting. I think this one is maybe the second biggest wild card of this offseason because it's so hard to say whether Real Muto goes back to the Phillies. I think he's been frustrated there to a certain extent. Um, Now, I think it's interesting whether the Phillies have money to sign him or not because I have them signing a couple other guys on this list, and I mean they've already got so much money tied up in Bryce Harper. They've got some guys that they're gonna want to re-sign soon, like Aaron Nola maybe. He it won't be too much longer until he's a free agent. It's one of those things where if you look at the Phillies, they got a lot of money tied up in McCutcheon this coming up year, and he's kind of a wild card for how much his value is he going to give you, and they got to fix that bullpen. So they have a lot of money they need to spend, but I couldn't really decide on another team. I know that there has been interest from his side on the Braves. I read a rumor a while back, but I don't really think the Braves are going to tie up that much money in a catcher, especially when they have a guy that's coming up a year who's going to play well most likely and had a great season this past year, and Travis d'Arnaud. There's been a lot of rumors with the Mets, but of course, I think they signed somebody. But I think if Stroman goes back on that qualifying offer, that ties up $20 million right there for them, and um, it'll be interesting to see. I know the Mets need a catcher, so they could very well do it. But I do have Realmuto going back to the Phillies. I think he gets 5 years, $100 million. The Phillies really, really, really want to re-sign him, and there's a lot of embarrassment from that trade if they don't re-sign him because they didn't make the playoffs, even in an expanded year. And I think they do bring him back. And 5 years, $100 million. I think it's about what he gets regardless of where he goes. So, but I do have him go back to Phillies mainly because I couldn't decide on which other team might pick him up. Um, but I think it's the most likely scenario. So.
Well, we'll jump to our top free agent, and that's going to be Trevor Bauer. We've talked a lot about Trevor Bauer this year, and he's absolutely deserving of being the best free agent available this year. I honestly don't know. I have no idea where he's going to go. I have no rumblings. I mean, Trevor Bauer, as much as he's out there in the media and very much showing the behind the scenes process of everything he does, um, it's wide open for him. He's said that he said that he'll only take 1 year deals, and now he's talking that he'll take any deal. And then you got him and his agent saying that they'll even look at maybe Korea. I don't think that's a real possibility, but it's just him going out there and saying things. So honestly, I just threw something down. I'm not confident in this, and I might change it, but I decided to put down the New York Mets because they got that new owner, and I think that they're going to want to make a splash, and they're not sure what you're going to get from Marcus Stroman, if he's even going to be back. Noah Syndergaard, you don't know, he's coming off of surgery, and I don't even know if he's going to be available this next year. Um, you
I
have
think he
Jacob.
should be. I think on Syndergaard, I think his Tommy John was back in the spring, so I think he should be ready to go at some point this year. Maybe not
Yeah,
at
but
the beginning, but
probably be a little bit later.
yeah.
Um, and with Jacob DeGrom and outside of them, they don't have nothing. I mean, Steven Matz isn't that great. They've been shuffling Seth Lugo and Robert Gazelman back and forth between the bullpen and the starting rotation. So I decided that the Mets were going to make a splash, their new $1 billion owner, and sign Trevor Bauer to a 7-year, $175 million deal.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. I'd be very surprised. I wouldn't be totally surprised if the Mets made a move, but I do think it's a little more likely they make a move to bolster their lineup a little bit, or maybe even their bullpen. Um, Especially with some of the guys they have returning from injury and stuff. I actually have Trevor Bauer going to, and I'm in the same boat as you when it comes to when it comes to Trevor Bauer, and I have no idea where he's going. This guy is very eccentric. He's very different, and he says a lot of things that he's just a different type of guy. And um, I know he said the thing about the 1 year deals a while ago. I think what ends up happening, I think a team signs him to a big multi-year deal, but gives him an opt out maybe like in year 2 of his contract, where it's not a 1 year deal for the team for sure. It's not a 1 year deal for him, but they maybe kind of buy him out of a 1 year deal by giving him a second year and having a later and having a larger basically uh, relief fund in case he gets hurt or something. So I have him signing to the Padres. Actually, I know he's got a good friendship with Mike Clevenger, who's now at the Padres. I know he really likes that style of baseball the Padres play, the young team, the real exciting young team. I think that's something that attracts Trevor Bauer. He's a guy that he played at UCLA, so he's a Southern California guy. I think he'd like to be there. And I know the Padres have been the most aggressive team during the pandemic on spending money and making moves, because this trade deadline they were very, very, very aggressive making moves. And so I have Trevor Bauer going there and to the Padres on an 8 year, $200 million deal, with the caveat that there's probably an opt out early in that deal. So that's a lot of money to tie up in a guy, especially when revenue is a big time question mark. But I mean, I think the Padres, like I say, they're one of the more aggressive teams since the pandemic's been going on, and I think it's a good fit. I think they need another pitcher, beyond their two really top starters that they have right now, in Lamette and Clevenger. So I have Trevor Bauer going to the Padres.
That'd be a lot of money they got tied up in three guys.
Oh yeah, it would be with
Oh,
Machado and Hosmer, and then you add in Bauer, and
Will
it would be one of
Myers.
those. And Will Meyer, it would be one of those really aggressive moves that they're saying we're going to go for it in this 5 year window, and we're going to win it in this 5 year window, or maybe twice. And then, but after that, we're going to have a lot of money tied up, and we're probably not going to be able to re-sign guys. So
Yeah.
um, they'll
It'll be
be very
interesting.
aggressive.
I know that they've already started conversations with Fernando Tatis about a potential extension this offseason as well. So maybe that's something that can, they work in there. But that is interesting. I mean, we're on the same point with how much money he gets per year. And pretty close on the years. Just we have no idea where Trevor Bauer's going. Um, I mean, literally any team could sign him. If you told me that Trevor Bauer was going to go sign with the Baltimore Orioles, I would not be totally shocked. He is just that type of guy.
I would.
I wouldn't
I think
honestly.
he's going. I think he goes to a team that's in contention. So
Hey, I would say the same thing for anybody else, but
yeah.
it's Trevor Bauer here we're talking about. I mean, if they offered him a 1 year, $45 million contract, he would go do it right now.
Oh yeah.
I know he wants to win, but that guy is so weird that he'd be willing to do something like that. Um, but that's pretty much our predictions for the kind of 15 guys we handpicked as our top free agents. There's free agency officially open today. There's going to be a lot of wild rumors. Don't know how much we're going to have to talk about in the next week or so, but hopefully we get some. If we don't get any real moves, hopefully we get some good juicy rumors that we can have quite a bit of conversation on, because I'm very afraid that this off season is going to drag on for a long time.
Yeah, we'll see. I think there's going to be some guys that sign early, but I do think that most of the players and most of the teams are going to wait it out because of not knowing what the financial situation is going to be for the teams next year. I think it's going to be difficult for teams to go ahead and make that decision early on to sign a player, and then you know a player is probably going to want to wait and see if maybe if things improve on the pandemic front later in the off season, you're looking like you're going to have a full revenue season. Maybe the teams will be willing to pay more money out, so maybe the players get a little bit more. And there's also the deal of the new CBA that we haven't seen yet, so that's a factor we haven't really talked about. So it's going to be an interesting offseason. It's going to be a strange offseason, but I'm I'm excited to see what happens. Real free agency for a contending team can be a lot of times be like Christmas Day. I mean, you wake up and you're getting all these new presents, you're getting all these new players, and It's going to be very exciting for some teams. It's going to be disappointing for some teams too. So
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for tuning in to this episode of the Bat Flip podcast, and we will catch you guys next week.
thank you guys.